see.
Are you recording this?
I think I'm going to record it.
Please,
Yeah.
so we can some sleep.
Yes, please, as it's gone bedtime.
Organized. Okay. This is the story of a character named Kannagi. And we have a written version of this story, linguistically dated, that it was written about 1,500 years ago. Yeah, I'm going to mute everybody else. That's right. And participants, mute all. There we go. Yes, it's linguistically dated. So it may be a true story, or it may be not, but it's really the reason that I moved and settled in Tamil Nadu. It's the epic of the Tamil people, of the state of Tamil Nadu. And I read it in English when I was in college, and I was just entranced with it. So it begins with, on the sea, on the coast of South India, facing Singapore. There was a basket bobbing on the ocean, a straw basket, tightly woven, and there was a baby inside that basket. So some fishing men saw that basket bobbing, and they went to it and saw the baby. It was a baby girl inside that basket. So they plucked the basket from the sea, and eventually one of the families who lived in this city, this was a large city in those days. It was called Pumpuhar. It's near Pondicherry, further south of Pondicherry. Now it's just a beach and a small place. It seems it fell into the sea, mostly. But it was the great seaport of its day, and that little baby girl was adopted by a wealthy fishing family, a merchant family. And she was raised, and I guess in those days, young people married around the age of 14. She was married to a young man, also of the merchant fishing community. And there are different versions. One version is that they lived happily for 1 year together as husband and wife. But then they went to a dance performance at the court of the local ruler. And the dance performance was by a young lady named Madhavi, who it was her first dance performance. And the husband, his name was Kovalan, he just fell in love with her as he was watching her dance. And his wife, Kannagi, was sitting next to him. And she saw that her husband was falling in love with this other woman. But what could she do? And then after the performance, the tradition was that the dancer would throw a wreath of flowers up in the air, and if it landed on around a man's head, he would become her patron. She, at the end of the performance, Madhavi threw the wreath of flowers, and whose head do you think it landed on? The husband, Kovalan. So in a way, it was not his fault. What could he do? It was fate. So he went off with this dancer for a whole year. He had an affair with her. He left his wife. And she did not complain. She did not get angry. She just prayed every day that her husband would come back. And after 1 year, he did come back. After he had spent all the family money wooing this dancer. He finally decided the dancer didn't really love him, and so he went back to his wife and he said, "Kannagi, dear, I'm sorry." And she said, "That's okay." And they decided to walk about 200 kilometers to the central city in the center of South India called Madurai. There they would start a new life. So they walked and had many adventures along the way, including they came across a tribe of people who were known as fierce tribal people who were known for stealing cattle and things of that sort. But that tribe, they treated Kannagi and her husband very kindly. And in fact, one young lady of the tribe went into spirit possession and announced that this young woman would become the queen of the southern lands. And referring to Kannagi, and Kannagi was sort of hiding behind her husband's shoulders and saying, I won't be the queen of anything. But there it was. So they came to the outskirts of Madurai and they decided that he would go into town to sell their remaining precious object, which was, the only thing they had left was gold anklets that she had on both ankles. And these were anklets with precious stones inside, rubies inside, many little golden casings. So she took off one of her anklets and gave it to her husband and said, "Okay, dear, go in and try to sell it." And the idea was that they would raise some money so they could rent a flat and start some sort of business. They were merchants, the merchant class. So he went in and he went to the gold market and announced, "Anklet for sale, anklet for sale. It's a beautiful anklet." And one man who was listening said, "Young man, I know exactly who might like that anklet. Come with me." So that man took the husband, Kovalan, to the local king. And the man, who was actually the court goldsmith of the local king, said to the local king, "King, this stranger, he is the one who stole your wife's anklet yesterday." Because an exact same looking anklet had gone missing from the local queen the day before, and actually it had been stolen by the court goldsmith. But now he saw an opportunity to frame and blame this stranger. And the king did not do a proper investigation. To tell you the truth, the king was in a rush to please his wife, who was missing an anklet, because this king himself, just like Kovalan, he also had been having an affair with a dancer. Yes, it's one of the mysteries of this story. And so this king wanted to do something quickly to get back in the good graces of his wife. So he ordered Kovalan, the husband, to be beheaded. And it was done. And Kovalan's body and head were thrown in the street. When this happened, his wife, Kannagi, who had been at the outskirts of town, she felt it. And she came in and she saw her husband's body in the street. And she knelt down and started screaming. In Tamil Nadu, when people scream and cry over a dead person, it's called opari. It's raw grief, but there's also some conventional movements and conventional things that people say and do. So she began this wailing, keening, and people were sort of gathered around. And she looked up at them and she said, "How could you have let this happen?" And they said, "Well, we didn't know, we didn't do it." And she said, "This is your city. You know everything that happens here. Are you the kind of people who only care about yourselves, who only care about your own families? Are there no decent people in this town? Are there no gods in this town? So she was speaking like this, and people said she's crazy, and they turned away from her. But she, oh, there's one legend that she actually put his head back on his body and stitched it on with a golden thread. But that's not written. That's just a local legend. And actually, the legend is that she brought him back to life, but he was still in love with the dancer, Madhavi. And he was still like saving the best food for her, the best mangoes for her. So as he was doing that, his wife Kannagi got fed up and she pulled the string and his head fell off again. That's a side legend. But anyway, she went to the palace to confront the king, to tell the king that the king had made a mistake, because she kept saying, my husband was not a thief. He did not steal the anklet from the queen. So the man, the gatekeeper at the gate said, you know, what's your name? What's your father's name? Where are you from? Kannagi did not stop. She did not listen to him. She did not answer him. She just walked in. Somehow they couldn't stop her. And she came to where the king was sitting in his court, and she said, King, you murdered my husband. You killed him without justice. My husband is not a thief. He was not a thief. And the king said, well, he was a thief. He had my wife's anklet. Kannagi said, that was not your wife's anklet. That was my anklet. And she said, give me the anklet that my husband was holding. And they gave it to her. She broke it open, and rubies came out of her husband's anklet. She then broke open her remaining anklet. Also, rubies came out. So it showed that the anklet he had and hers were matching. And then she said, give me the queen, take off your remaining anklet and open it. So the queen opened her remaining anklet, pearls came out. So that clinched it. That proved that her husband was innocent. So the king said, oh my God. The king said, I am the thief. And he stood up and he fell down. And his blood pressure stopped, his heart stopped, his breathing stopped. He died. He died of a broken heart, that he had abused justice like that. But Kannagi she was not satisfied, because she was still also upset that the people had not supported her. So she went out and walked around the city 3 times and tore off her left breast and threw it at the city wall. She requested to the god of fire that he should burn the city to purify it. But good people and animals should escape. And that's what happened. The city burst into flames. And one group of people who did escape were advisors to the king, who had told him, this man is innocent, don't touch him. But the king had not listened. So this group of men, it was actually a subcaste of men and their families, came out and walked with Kannagi towards the western mountains, the mountains that border with Kerala. And along the way, actually there's a local legend that as Kannagi was walking with these men, the goddess of Madurai, Meenakshi, came running after Kannagi and said, Kannagi, please stop the burning. It's enough, please, please. And finally Kannagi relented. Kannagi was, there's a legend that Kannagi was actually the daughter of the king of Madurai, and I imagine it's possible that one of the advisors to the king, who was walking with Kannagi now, and their families, they might have told Kannagi because she didn't know. See, the king of Madurai, when his daughter was born, an astrologer had said, "This daughter will help bring about your downfall and the downfall of your city." So the king told his men to take her off and kill her, but they didn't kill her. They put her in a basket and they put her on the sea. And I imagine that the advisors to the king, when they learned that Kannagi had been found in a basket and was adopted, they put two and two together, and they might have told Kannagi, that was your father. So anyway, they got to the mountains and they started a new settlement in the forest. Some local tribal women also joined. They really started a new tribe based on especially fairness and justice. Shortly thereafter, Kannagi left the world. One legend is that this was in a movie from 1942, that Shiva came down in a chariot. Her husband had really been an incarnation of Shiva. And he came down and saw her walking in the forest, and he said, "Shakti, Shakti," who is a goddess, consort of Shiva. And Kannagi, of course, she didn't identify as Shakti, but slowly it dawned on her. And in the movie, slowly her costume, her headdress, or things she's carrying become the things that Shakti carries, and they go off in the chariot together. So there's a lot more to the story and many more small legends, but that's the basic story. Will anyone give a little bit of feedback? Does any of this resonate with anyone? Does anyone have any thoughts or feelings about the story? Come off mute. Unmute yourselves if you would.
It's very interesting.
Hmm?
It's very interesting to me because I live in the United States, and the story is, I was wondering if that's a story that children that grow up there where you are would know that is a common story, because I've never heard it before.
It's taught to children, but of course it's not really a children's story with the affairs and the ripping off of the breast, but it's taught as a political allegory to children in Tamil Nadu, that just as Kannagi and her husband were abused by the king, the Tamil people, some Tamil people feel that they have been abused by the North Indian people.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a very known story here in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, even though I myself have never heard it, but I was thinking that it probably is a story.
It's not very well known outside of Tamil Nadu. It's not known in the
Well,
West.
I'm very glad I'm glad I got a chance to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman?
I was struck by the number of motifs that are scattered in stories around the world. I think the basket is the one that jumps right out. But what really got me were the efforts to forestall fate. That fate is, I have a book of Indian tales put together by a scholar. Okay, I'm going to massacre the name. It was put out by Pantheon, but Ranu Machin. Anyways, there's a number of stories about fate and where people try to get around it, through it, but it always grips them. And so that's the thing that struck me about your story. And by the way, I have a copy of the anklet here in English. And I snuck out to go and take a look for it, but I couldn't find it. But now I'm going to find it and read it.
Of course, the term epic is a Western term to refer to a long story, often of a military expedition. But somehow here in Tamil Nadu, somebody called it an epic about 100 years ago, and the name stuck. But really, it's an anti-epic in the sense that Kannagi and her husband are not on a military expedition. And actually, the central episode is a critique of abuse of state power and military
It's a
power.
very long story. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot more to it. The dancer who Kovalan had the affair with for a year, they had a daughter. And when the dancer and her daughter found out about the tragedy in Madurai, both of them eventually became Buddhist monks and cut off their hair. And the daughter had a famous career herself as a Buddhist teacher of Buddhism.
Actually, I'm Tamil and I grew up in Tamil Nadu. Now I live in the US, and we all heard about this story, and there would be dance programs based on this story, and Kannagi was considered the epitome of virtue, what a Tamil woman should be. So,
well, she's lost favor with many Tamil women now, because young women, because they say that she was wrong to put up with it when her husband went off for a year and spent all the family money. And other people criticize her for that she burned Madurai. But I always say she did not burn Madurai. She suggested it to the god of fire, and he did it. But they say that's just a technicality.
yeah, I visited Madurai a few months ago, and you know, this legend is alive and well in Madurai.
So 32 years ago, when I first came to India, I actually walked this path from the city on the coast to Madurai and then to the mountains later, about 500 kilometers altogether. So you see, I like marathon events.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wrote a little book about it. Okay, I'm going to cut this session short. There's obviously a lot more to it, but I need to go out of Zoom for a few minutes and then come back into it. In about 40 minutes, we're going to have a workshop with Aparna Athreya in Bangalore. Oh, Aparna, you're here.
Oh, yes, I've been here.
Wonderful.
Good morning.
Yeah, for technical reasons, I have to close the Zoom meeting for a few minutes, and then we'll please everyone, if you can, come back in about 10 minutes, okay? And can someone tell me how to make a copy of the chat room?
I can tell you. This is
Yes.
Rachel.
Yes.
So if everyone opens your chat, you can toggle open and close. If
Yeah.
you look at the bottom,
Yeah.
there's the drop down if you're going to write messages to everyone or if you're going to private message people.
Yeah.
Just make sure you put it back. But if you follow that to the right, you'll find 3 horizontal dots. If you're
Okay.
on a phone, you may not have this option. This
I
is
see
usually
it.
an option if you have a
Save
laptop.
chat? Save
Yes,
chat.
and so you click on that save chat. When you close, it will eventually pop up and you can rename it. And I highly recommend you do so to put today's date or
Yeah,
why it is. Because
That'll
they
save
all,
it onto my desktop.
yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to close the session here, but please everybody come back in about 10 minutes, okay? Okay, see you in a few minutes.